Immunization practices in altered immune status. The basic principle or the basic intention of immunization is to develop immunity against specific antigens so that we can prevent diseases caused by those antigens. Now, to develop immunity, it is the human body's responsibility that it is when exposed to the antigen, it will set in a number of uh, reactions, a number of responses. Those will be ranging from setting in an inflammatory response so as to combat that antigen, developing memory cells, developing antibodies amongst those. And these all are together known as the immune responses towards that antigen, so that the body is saved from the harmful effects of the antigen. But this immune response is optimum in a normal body, or when the normal human, or when the immune status of the human body is normal. But in many conditions, the immune system is damaged, or it is suppressed, or the immune system does not generate an adequate immune response because of many reasons. So when you vaccinate a child in such a condition, the immune system is not going to put up an adequate immune response against that antigen. Therefore, the immunogenicity of that vaccine is reduced. In such cases, the immunization pattern, the immunization doses, the number of doses, they are to be altered. So in this discussion today, we will go for understanding the immunization process, what it should be in case where the immune system of the body is altered. It is either absent, as in case of genetic disorders, that is XLA, or in case where it is suppressed because of medication or some other reason. So what are the principles of immunization in immunity altered situation? The efficacy and safety of vaccine depends on the degree of immunodeficiency. As we have already seen that the immune response, the immunogenicity, the immunity generation of that against that antigen depends on the immunity of the body, the immune response set by the body. Better the immune system, safer the immune system, stronger the immune system, better will be the response against that antigen. As the immune system gets weaker and weaker due to any reason, it might be suppression due to iatrogenic causes, due to some diseases, as and more the immune system deficiency occurs, the immune response towards the antigen will be decreased. So higher the immunodeficiency, lower will be the immune response from the body, and therefore lower will be the efficacy, lower will be the safety of the vaccine, and higher will be the required number of doses at that time, probably, not always. When the immune system is depressed, when the immune system is suppressed, in those cases, a caution has to be taken for while giving live vaccines, live attenuated vaccines. But all inactivated vaccines can be safely administered to that child, because when a live vaccine is given, when a live vaccine is injected, the bacteria or the virus, we will call it as an organism, is going to go and multiply into the body, and then it will generate an immune response. But when the immunity is low, when the immune system is suppressed, then this multiplication can give a rise to the disease to that in that patient. But in inactivated vaccines, there are no live organisms, so there will be no multiplication of that organism. It's the antigen which we are given, and the dose is fixed. So there is no chance of developing that disease in when an inactivated vaccine is administered. So all inactivated vaccines can be given safely. A caution needs to be considered while administering live vaccines. If there is moderate or mild immunodeficiency, live vaccines can be given. But if there is severe immunodeficiency, all live vaccines are contraindicated. They should never be administered if the patient is with severe immunodeficiency. In cases where an antigen involves the cell-mediated immunity, the CMI, in those cases, live vaccine need more caution, because where CMI is involved, the live vaccine, when administered, the organisms might multiply, the T cells might not work, and the organism itself might cause dissemination of the disease. Therefore, in CMI disorders, live vaccines always carry a chance of creating or disseminating that disease. So a caution is required. In immunodeficiency patients, as we have already seen that, or I have already told, higher number of doses might be required, higher amount of dose might be required, and they should be given if they are indicated. Like in some cases, the routine hepatitis B vaccine antigen dose is 10 micrograms. But when immune system is suppressed, then in those cases, we require to give them 20 microgram doses so that a faster immune generation and a better immune generation is seen. Before giving or administering a booster dose, if possible, get an antibody titer done. The antibody titer helps in deciding when to give a booster dose, how fast the immunity wanes, how frequent the booster doses are required for that antigen, for that disease, for that vaccine. So wherever possible, get an antibody titer done. In such cases, regular boosters may be administered where the antibody titer falls. Regular boosters may be administered on schedule if the antibody titer is normal, or they can be preponed if the antibody titer falls. And this can be done as, or this can be rescheduled as the necessity arises. So antibody titer is always important, and whenever possible, we should go for that. The person who is suffering from immunodeficiency always has a high chance of contracting different diseases, right from his immediate contacts, the household contacts also. So to prevent those kind of things, to prevent that patient getting infected from household contacts, a thing should always be remembered, and it should be noted that all the household contacts of that person should be fully immunized. Not a single household contact should be left unimmunized. Everyone should be immunized so that we are reducing the chances of passing on the disease from the family members to the affected fellow. In our general practice, the commonest condition where we are going to encounter an immune deficiency state is an HIV positive child, or a child born to an HIV positive mother. In both these cases, the immunity is going to be suppressed. The immunity which is affected, we have two types of immunity, the humoral immunity and the cell-mediated immunity. In case of his HIV, the cell-mediated immunity is affected, the cell-mediated immunity is suppressed. So while administering live vaccines, we have to be very cautious. All live vaccines are permitted in asymptomatic HIV infected patients except OPV. I will tell you why OPV is not well. So if the patient is asymptomatic, if he is asymptomatic HIV, all live vaccines can be safely given asymptomatic, and therefore his cell differentiation count, that is CD4 count, will be more than 15% of the total count or more than 200 per cmm. And he does not have any symptoms of HIV. But remember over here, when we say live vaccines are permitted, BCG also comes under live vaccine. And no HIV positive child is symptomatic at birth. No HIV positive child. Basically, at birth, we cannot differentiate whether the child is positive or negative based on antibody tests. The first test to check whether the child is positive or negative is done by a PCR kit or the polymerase chain reaction kit at the age of around 6 to 8 weeks or even 12 weeks. Before that, we have no other way to find out whether the child is positive or negative, because antibodies are passed on passively from the mother to the child, and these, if the patient is negative for HIV, the antibodies will take about 12 to 18 months to disappear. BCG is given at birth, and no child born to an HIV mother, even if he is infected, he will be always asymptomatic. So BCG can be given very safely to a child. Yes, immune suppression, if there is there, though asymptomatic, there will be dissemination of tuberculosis. But looking at the burden of tuberculosis in the third world countries or the developing countries and also in India, it is advisable, and IAP also recommends that WHO, along with WHO, that BCG should be given to all children born to HIV positive mother immediately after birth. OPV should not be given because there has been or there is a high chance that OPV might cause vaccine induced poliomyelitis. Therefore, OPV should not be given. All live vaccines are forbidden in a symptomatic child or a child who is on ART, that is antiretroviral treatment. A HIV positive child generally becomes symptomatic after 20 months of age. The mean age for becoming symptomatic is around 8 months after at its chronological age. Therefore, up to 8 months, we do not have any other live vaccine except BCG and OPV. And therefore, we can administer BCG. From 9 months on, we have measles, or we can even give MMR. And therefore, once the child becomes symptomatic, we need to stop all live vaccines. If the child has not developed any symptoms, we can go for, and if the child is positive by PCR, we have checked it at the age of 2 months or 3 months of the child. If he is positive, before administering measles, we need to go for a CD4 count. If the CD4 counts are permitting us to administer a live vaccine, we should give. The cutoff values of CD4 count is 200 per cmm or 15% of the total count. If it is more than 15%, if the CD4 counts are more than 15% or more than 200, you can safely administer a live vaccine. But if they are less than that, ART needs to be started, and we need to prevent the child from giving any live vaccine. Initially, a few years back, the CD4 count cutoff were 250, but now it is 200. A child who is asymptomatic, in those children, MMR vaccine and varicella vaccine should be administered, but with caution. Whether to give MCV, that is meningococcal conjugate vaccine, is very debatable. If the situation permits, we can give. If the situation does not, we need not. And even if the situation permits, If the patient is in the endemic area or if he is going to go to some endemic area, only in that case, meningococcal vaccine should be administered. The second condition where in clinical setup where we encounter is the child being on immunosuppressive therapy. The child is on immunosuppressive therapy like using of steroids for a longer time, systemic steroids, due to any reason, and in those cases the immune response generated by the body, the host body, will be very erratic. So when should we consider that the patient is immunosuppressed when on immunosuppressive therapy? The child should be considered immunosuppressed when he is receiving oral corticosteroids in higher doses. Higher doses means prednisolone at 2 mg per kg per day or equivalent to 40 mg per meter square per day for those children who are weighing more than 10 kilos. And sorry, the corticosteroid therapy is in place or is being continued for more than 2 weeks in the past, continuous 2 weeks in the past. That is, this higher dose the child is taking for 2 weeks, more than 2 weeks in the past. In such cases, the child should not receive any live virus vaccine, including OPV, until the steroids have been discontinued, because this causes virus induced, or what we will call it as vaccine induced disease. So to prevent that, we should not give them any viral vaccines until the steroids have been stopped and 1 month, that is 4 weeks, have lapsed after discontinuation of therapy. The child should not receive any live virus vaccine during the therapy except in special circumstances. The special circumstances are epidemics which come up, pulse polio vaccinations which are routinely given. Except for these two conditions, the epidemics are mostly of influenza, and wherever possible, we can prevent or we can avoid a live viral vaccine and give an inactivated vaccine. So, except in special circumstances like pulse polio or influenza epidemic, we should not. The third special circumstances is the child has to travel in endemic area where there is yellow fever, like the African countries. In those cases, only live vaccines can be administered, but the patient needs to be monitored continuously after administering the vaccine for at least 4 weeks, routinely. Even after giving the vaccine, we should administer him for development of that disease or complication of the vaccine for at least 4 weeks. Children are on lesser dose than the above mentioned dose, or those who are on inhaled corticosteroids, like patients with asthma who are on inhaled corticosteroids, or who are on topical therapies, like for some skin disorders where we introduce or where we give topical steroids. They can be safely administered any type of vaccine at that age, and the effect of that vaccine is good because they are low dose steroids. Even systemic steroids who are on tapering doses for a longer span, we can administer them live vaccines. Who are on topical doses, they can be administered live vaccines, or who are on long standing corticosteroid inhalation. The doses are in micrograms, so they can be given very safely, all live vaccines. Killed vaccines are safe, or antigen vaccines are safe in all conditions of immunosuppression therapy. They can be administered during the ongoing immunosuppression therapy. Immunosuppression also occurs when the patient is undergoing chemotherapy for malignancies, or he is requiring chemotherapy for bone marrow transplantation. In these cases, there is immunosuppression. It is an induced immunosuppression. And in these cases, inactivated influenza vaccine is recommended for all children during chemotherapy. Remember the principle that live attenuated influenza vaccine is not to be given, but inactivated influenza vaccine is recommended for all children who are on chemotherapy. If the condition arises that faster immunogenic response is required against hepatitis B, where you are transfusing blood or blood products recurrently, and there is a high chance of getting hepatitis B disease through the transmission. Though we check the blood for hepatitis B antibodies, we don't check the antigen. So even if it is mentioned that it is HBV negative, tested and negative for HBV, the patient might be in window period, and therefore faster immunogenic response is required. And in those cases, double dose, that is 20 mcg, 20 micrograms of HBV vaccine is recommended for only previously unimmunized children against HBV. Now this is very difficult because because HBV has already come into existence in national program since year 2000. So it's 20 years. So children who are not immunized for HBV, finding them is difficult. But there might be who have been left off from this program and they might require it. So a higher dose. Similarly, in adults, the dose will be 40 micrograms because there may be many adults who have not received an HBV vaccine. So for them, it will be 40 micrograms. Sibling of a person, of a child who is on chemotherapy should receive only IPV and not OPV, because the OPV vaccine is a live vaccine and it is excreted after administration through the stools, and that might spread sorry, that might spread from excretion. Therefore, OPV should not be given to a sibling of a person on immunosuppression. Supposing by mistake OPV has been administered to the sibling, that is to the brother, to the cousins who are living in the same household, then in that case, or if the patient cannot afford IPV and he has to be given OPV, or he has been given a dose through pulse polio immunization, then in that case, the sibling should be separated from the affected person for at least 2 weeks. BCG is contraindicated in ongoing chemotherapy and can only be given after 6 months of completion of chemotherapy as a single dose in previously unimmunized children without performing the Montaux. There are no chemotherapies which start at birth, but if at birth BCG is missed out and later on we need to give it, but the child is on chemotherapy, we should give BCG only after completion of chemotherapy, 6 weeks after completion of the complete chemotherapy. In cases where we are going to go for hematopoietic stem cell transplant, like in cases of bone marrow transplantation, of thalassemia or blood-borne malignancies, in those cases, 3 doses of tetanus or diphtheria containing vaccine should be administered after HSCT. We have already administered those vaccines to the child, but we have changed the whole bone marrow. So the memory cells which were developed, the immune system which was already developed, that has gone down, that has been reduced, and therefore, and this carries again, the same rule applies to those patients who are going to get stem cell transplant also. So in all these cases, after the completion of HSCT, we need to administer again 3 doses of diphtheria and tetanus containing toxoid. For patients aged more than 7 years, a dose of Tdap vaccine may be administered, a single dose may be administered followed by 2 doses of TD vaccine as booster. We need to repeat 3 doses of IPV, Haemophilus influenzae B, hepatitis B vaccine and pneumococcal vaccine again after 6 to 12 months after completion of HSCT. If the child is more than 2 years, then in that case, we can give one single dose of PPSV if there is no graft versus host disease, severe graft versus host disease, or a chronic graft versus host disease. For patients with this kind of disorder, a 4th dose of PCV can be given after HSCT, 12 months of HSCT. In patients who have GVHD, we should give PCV rather than PPSV. That is, we should not give Pneumo 23 vaccine. We should give Prevenar or Synflorix. We should give a conjugate vaccine of pneumococcal rather than a pure polysaccharide vaccine. And who have this chronic disease or severe GVHD, a 4th booster should be given after completion of 3 doses. A 4th booster should be given after 1 year of HSCT. These patients should receive a shot of influenza vaccine annually, preferably inactivated influenza vaccine. Live vaccine should not be administered to HSCT patients with active GVHD or ongoing immunosuppression. MMR and varicella, they need to be administered, but these should be administered after 24 months after completion of the transplant, and if the patient is supposed to be immunocompetent. If the patient is immunocompetent, then in that case, we can administer MMR and varicella. Some cases might arise where the child has to undergo organ transplant or organ removal like spleen removal. In case of organ transplant, no live vaccine can be administered after the organ is transplanted. So we should try to complete the vaccination, live vaccination before the organ is transplanted. So you can accelerate the schedule. Regular vaccine schedule should be followed. You can accelerate it. Recipients of SOT, that is soft organ transplant, should complete all immunization wherever possible prior to the transplant, and the schedule can be accelerated if it is needed. All vaccines should be completed at least 14 days, in some cases at least 28 days before the transplant. Live vaccine should be completed at least 4 weeks prior to transplant, and inactivated vaccine should be completed at least 2 weeks prior to transplant. In the post-transplant period, all the live vaccines are contraindicated throughout life. You cannot administer any live vaccine after the transplant because the patient will be on immunosuppressive therapy lifelong. So wherever you can replace these with inactivated vaccines, you can administer inactivated vaccines after 6 months of organ transplant or any time after that. Replacement can be possible with flu, with hepatitis A. In these cases, you can give them after 6 months of organ transplant. Again, like we have seen in HSCT, all contact individuals of that person should be immunized specifically for influenza and pneumococcal disease. In case of asplenia, that is splenectomy or functional asplenia, where the spleen is not functioning. Spleen is a major organ in the immune system. So where the spleen is a functional, or where you need asplenia, where you need to go for splenectomy, pneumococcal conjugate vaccine or pure polysaccharide vaccine should be given. The primary course should be completed prior to splenectomy, and a PPSV, that is pure polysaccharide vaccine, for can be given after the age of 2 years, and these doses should be given every 5 years so that the immunity is maintained. Again, influenza vaccines should be administered annually. Every year, the children should receive inactivated influenza vaccine and not live attenuated influenza vaccine. In cases where you need to give vaccines or you need to give the first dose of vaccine, in these cases, these doses should be given at least 14 days prior to splenectomy. If you can complete the schedule before splenectomy, it's well and good. But if you are not able to do that, then in that case, the first dose, at least the system should be primed for splenectomy, before splenectomy, by that antigen at least 14 days before the procedure. If the patient is having congenital immunodeficiency B cell, that is XLA, then in these cases the body is not going to give any kind of immune response, neither to live vaccines nor to inactivated vaccines. So vaccination in these cases, though done, is null, it is void. But care should be taken that live vaccines, bacterial or viral, should never be administered. Inactivated vaccines can be administered, but they are ineffective, they are futile. So then why should we give the vaccine? The reason, these might generate a very minimal immune response, though it is of no use. So then these patients, how can they be prevented from contracting the disease? Yes, they can be prevented. They are receiving IVIGs, the immunoglobulins, intravenously throughout the life. So they are going to be protected against non-specific diseases, pneumococcal diseases, influenza diseases by that immunoglobulin, which is being administered every 4 weeks to the child. So XLA, in these cases, there is X-linked immunodeficiency. There is no chance of generating immune response to the vaccine, any vaccine you administered, but special care needs to be taken that no live vaccine is ever administered. You can administer inactivated vaccine, but they are futile. But remember to give them immunoglobulins. The next case which we have, or next condition where we have or we are asked about, is whether vaccines can be given in pregnancy and postpartum. Yes, vaccines can be administered during pregnancy and in postpartum period also. Live vaccines are contraindicated during pregnancy. No pregnant woman should receive any live vaccine. If pregnancy is being planned and a live vaccine needs to be given, most commonly it is the influenza vaccine or the rubella vaccine, then pregnancy should be avoided for at least 4 weeks. The safest period is 12 weeks. But at least 4 weeks, pregnancy should be avoided. Conception should be avoided. 12 weeks is the safest period. Supposingly, by mistake, if a live vaccine like rubella, measles, chickenpox is administered to a lady, then a pregnant lady, then that is not an indication for termination of pregnancy. If there are teratogenic effects, you can terminate it later on, but otherwise an accidental administration of live vaccine is not an indication for termination of pregnancy. Inactivated vaccines can be given safely to the pregnant lady and during the postpartum period also. All inactivated vaccines can be given safely. Live attenuated influenza vaccine is contraindicated and it can be replaced with 2 doses of inactivated influenza vaccine. Tdap should be given in every pregnancy, preferably in the third trimester, so that the delivered child or the expected neonate is protected against the pertussis disease for a longer span, against diphtheria for a longer span. Just advising or administering tetanus does not help. If we prefer Tdap, then in that case, the child might receive immunity for a longer span against pertussis, community acquired pertussis, community spread pertussis, and also against diphtheria. So in short, inactivated vaccines are safe. Few live vaccines are also safe, though the result of that is very, very vague, not still substantiated. But remember, never to administer a yellow fever vaccine to a pregnant lady. In acute illnesses, all vaccines can be given provided the acute illness is not severe. If it is mild, you can always give it. In case of moderate and severe acute illness, you can postpone the vaccine. Minor illnesses are not an indication for postponement of the disease, for the postponement of the vaccine. In chronic diseases, children with chronic neurological, endocrinological diseases like diabetes or diabetes insipidus or thyroid disorders, who are suffering from liver disorders, renal disorders, hematological disorders like the malignancies, cardiac disorders, pulmonary disorders, or gastrointestinal diseases are always at an increased risk of catching up infections and transforming them into serious infections. Even in these cases, live vaccines may be given very safely in these children, in all patients with chronic diseases, provided they are not immunosuppressed, provided they are not immunocompromised. These children, without fail, should be administered pneumococcal vaccines, hepatitis A vaccine, varicella vaccine, influenza vaccine, and rotavirus vaccine. You can get the further details on these sites by reading these books. Visiting these sites, you can get further details. You can access these things. You can access this presentation at our Facebook page of Kaumar Web. They are all available there. Thank you.